Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window in Door of Georgia. As you can see, we're set up a little bit different than normal. This is kind of a yearly occurrence for us. Perhaps you'll remember this is the Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic kickoff luncheon. This is essentially, for many of us, the start to our football season because it's the indication that next week our first high school games will take place, which this year we're looking forward to broadcast as a part of the Peachtree Sports Network and on Atlanta News First, and then after that, we're kind of off and rolling here. So fun day for us, also as it relates to our typical day job, busy stuff around Dog Nation, celebrating a commitment on Saturday from Anthony Lonon. We'll talk about that. And, of course, what continues to take place during Georgia's fall camp with the first padded practice taking place on Saturday. We are heavy involved in all of that and looking forward to talking to you about all of it here over the course of the next few minutes. We're going to roll through your comments. We'll find out what's on your mind here in the chat, and then we'll get it going with the big show after that. And, of course, as per usual, Jon Stinchcomb stops by today. So all the stuff that you are expecting, we'll get it all here today. I happen to be on YouTube, so I'll start there today. Scott Moody says, good morning, Dog Nation from Valdosta. Watched Corey Howard play in the scrimmage Friday night. Even though it was a scrimmage, he looked more aggressive on the field than last year and bigger. Go Dogs. So a good positive update on a Georgia commit. And, of course, you did have across the state lots of scrimmages. There'll be scrimmages again this weekend, too, and then the games themselves actually begin next week. So we're kind of right here in the midst of it. Many have had a chance to watch high school football here this weekend, and that was certainly a great thing to be able to see. Breda Pest Management, our guy, celebrating the fact that our good friend Faraday is also in the comments section. So Faraday, who's in our YouTube chat right now, the golden shoe from last week of she and I together there at the gorgeous orchard, enjoying all of that with our friends from Mercier Farms. That was the picture of Faraday, and she's in our YouTube comment section right now. You love having her as a part of the chat. Breda said sorry he's not here with us today. Of course, he's a big part of our high school football coverage here. He says he doesn't do coat and tie. Well, listen, this is, I guess, probably the only show of the year that I dress up for this much. But, it's kind of nice to get sort of dressed up every now and then. You can stand here at the microphone. You sort of feel like a newsman a little bit. So not a bad thing necessarily, but that's awesome. Zach Smith, Daniel Aldrich sharing some compliments. I certainly appreciate that. Colby Straughter says, what's it going to take to get me down there to the Wintersville Classic? Let me tell you something. There is nothing I'd love more than to see Valdosta and Lowndes in person sometime. I hope I get the chance to do that. What a special experience that would be. So if I have my way, you better believe at some point in time I'll get my chance to do that and would certainly love to be a part of it. Let me get some comments here at DawgNation.com there as well as part of that chat. And we'll get ready to rock and roll and tell you all about, for us, what's going to be a very busy show, including a very funny comment, or at least the reaction to it I thought was kind of funny. Something that Warren Brinson said as a part of Green Bay Packers training camp. We'll give that to you here coming up in just a little bit. For now, though, we're kind of rolling on with more comments here at DawgNation.com. Our buddy Brian Whitehead, apparently he's sharing some good news. We'll give you more of that. Roger W. checking in, as he says, from the mountains of North Carolina. You love that. Randy Hall giving you a shout-out to the old rock band ZZ Top with Sharp Dress Man. Appreciate that. I guess that's an honor of me. What a great thing that is to be able to hear. Senior Dog 54 says, we play early, we play fast, hit ball, drive up, and hit it again, usually done in 2.5 hours. Oh, I guess that maybe is reference to his golf game, so you love that. Hey, I always say this all the time. I can't promise that I'll play well. In fact, I can almost promise you the opposite, but I will try to play fast. I really will, for sure. All right, here's some good news from our buddy Brian Whitehead. Let me read this to you. He says, good morning, BA. Want to give a shout-out to my oldest daughter, Madison, starting her first day as a licensed athletic trainer at Young Harris College in North Georgia. And my middle daughter, Haley, is starting her first day at UGA Law School. Brian, what an incredible legacy to be proud of. Sounds like your daughters are doing great. What a great thing that is to hear on both those fronts. Athletic trainer, very important job. I can tell you right now, both my kids make use of their athletic training staff at their school. So that's a very, very important job indeed. And obviously when it comes to UGA Law School, one of the most prestigious institutions that we have here in our state. What an incredible accomplishment that is, Brian. A lot to be proud of there for you, for sure on that. That is incredible news. Senior Dog 54 also mentioned the fact that it's kind of rained out on the links here today. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the case. Although if you can find a way, this is my sort of theory about golf, is that I usually play better when it's empty, and it's certainly more fun when it's not super crowded. So if you can find sort of an unpleasant weather day, either extremely hot or in some cases pretty cold, you usually can kind of keep others away. And that means there's a little bit, less competition for the course itself, and you can just sort of be out there and enjoy yourself. I do like to play relatively fast, but it's also kind of sometimes nerve-wracking to have, people waiting on you, or if you feel like you're standing there waiting on other people, it's like you feel like you're in line at Disney World or something like that. So I do enjoy golf when it's not super crowded, and usually bad weather kind of keeps people away. So if you can find your way onto the course, it's not a bad time to play. Perhaps that's the case. Let's see what else. UGA Marine says it's the first official day of practice for high school football teams in Texas, so they're getting ready to get rock and rolling. Georgia teams have been practicing here for a little while, but very much so. I mean, this is one of the things, if you do like high school football, it just comes back so much sooner than college and pro. Now, we did have the preseason game on Thursday, but high school football, the regular season begins 2 weeks from this week. So, if you do care about high school football, the good thing about that, at least here in Georgia, is it starts so much sooner, so you get a chance to enjoy that. DT, thank you for the compliment. Got a little dressed up here today. Jeremy Smith says he thinks the football season starts way too early. A lot of this is just so you can get the playoffs done in December. A lot of things with school kind of operates on the semester calendar. Academically, one of the reasons why they start school so early is because they want to get that first semester done pre-Christmas, give you a chance to do something completely different on the other side of the holiday break or the Christmas break. And if you're going to start school early, I guess the theory is why not play games early here too. Roger W. says, I look like a preacher today. The funny thing is I'm not really quite so sure how much preachers even dress like this anymore. Certainly they did when I was a kid. Maybe not quite as much anymore, but maybe we'll do an altar call here before it's all said and done. Let me go back to YouTube here for a moment, find out what's on their mind over here. Tyrone Brown asking what we're doing today. So to give you a quick reminder again, so we're live here, hotel just in the Atlanta area, actually very close to Truist Park if you want to know. It's our Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic kickoff luncheon. Myself, Kaylee Manziel, who's with me today. We are a part of high school football coverage each week on this year. Most of our game is going to be on Atlanta News First. That's Channel 46 here in Atlanta and the Peachtree Sports Network. And the big event, season kickoff event, which we call the Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic, we always begin that with a luncheon. This is for us kind of an unofficial start to the season. And so we do this each year, and it's here today. And with this, we'll be really in the midst of the football season after that. So that's why we're here. Fun time. But, of course, the show, as you've come to expect it, we don't think it's going to be any different. In fact, we think we've got a really fun one planned. So let me tell you more about that. But as is our custom prior to that, let's get ready to fire up that animation. Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. As you can see, I look a little different, our location a little bit different than it normally is. The good news, though, is the show itself exactly the way that you've come to expect it. This is a bit of a tradition for us. Each year around this time, we broadcast the show live from what we call the Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic Kickoff Luncheon. This is the big season opening event that I've been privileged to be part of for the last few years, culminating 2 Saturdays from now with a quartet of games taking place at Mercedes-Benz Stadium that you can watch on Channel 46, known as Atlanta News First. And to celebrate the start of the high school football season and the football season in general, we gather here at an Atlanta area hotel around this time each and every year to do all of that. Today is our day to do that. So at the completion of today's show, I'll go inside. That's why I'm dressed up. Kind of MC a portion of the proceedings, talk to some of the coaches and players who are on hand. And it's always a great chance for this high school football community in Georgia to come together. That's why we're here today. But prior to all of that, we got some work to take care of as it relates to the Georgia Bulldogs. Jon Stinchcomb joins us today. You've come to expect that. Big commitment over the weekend. You better believe we'll have a strong reaction to that. I thought Kaylee Manziel, Jeff Sintel did a wonderful job of presenting that to you via video on Saturday afternoon. A really great video that's worth your time to go back and check out. It's about 10 minutes long. You should go see it. And off the top today, a former Georgia player has said something kind of funny, drawn a little bit of a reaction from those in the NFL, But more importantly, it's perhaps a little bit of a subtle warning to those going through fall camp here at Georgia right now, especially those maybe going through it the very first time. And it's maybe even more true than the speaker of this statement actually realized. We're going to start with that here today. We're glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
You know, today in many ways is one of those days that probably means a little more to me than it does to you. And I always try to be aware of this, of kind of what's just sort of inside baseball for those of us who do what I do or work around me, and for those that are in the larger audience. For me personally, and for I think a lot of us who are kind of here together today, it's a special day that I look forward to really for the entirety of the summer. So I'm here at Atlanta Area Hotel. And this is something, if you're a longtime listener or viewer to us, you'll remember. This is the Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic Kickoff Luncheon. We've got high school football starting next week, and this is our way of celebrating the return of that. It's something I very much look forward to. So if you're watching on video, you'll see me dressed a little bit different. If you're with us for the full show, you'll notice that we get off the air a little earlier than normal. I've got some business to take care of, representing both DawgNation and the folks from Peachtree Sports Network and Atlanta News First and our broadcast with Score Atlanta in this ballroom later on today with some of the top coaches and players from high school football in Georgia are going to be on hand. I look forward to this each and every year. I know my colleague Kaylee Manziel does. Jeff Sintel will be here later on. Other luminaries as well. It's something we just really enjoy, and so today is our day to do that. But prior to that, of course, we're going to do a great show for you. At least we're going to do our best to make it great. We've certainly planned one we think is really interesting, and I want to start that this way. I was noticing a comment this week from the former Georgia defensive lineman, always an interesting guy, one of the more outspoken leaders at Georgia during his time here, including last season. That's the defensive lineman Warren Brinson. Brinson has now left Georgia. He's with the Green Bay Packers. He is going through their training camp there. And listen, the one thing that Kirby's been very clear about, that Georgia players have sort of bragged about when it comes to Georgia, is that in preparation for the NFL, they have grinded so hard at Georgia that when they get there, they're just ready for it. And we're led to believe that one of the reasons why numerous NFL teams, the Green Bay Packers included, have targeted so many former Georgia Bulldogs players with their NFL draft picks is because there's a certain brand associated with Georgia that if you bring in a former UGA guy, there's just a level of trust there. This guy is going to be able to handle what we're going to ask for him. He's going to have a certain professionalism about him. He's going to take care of himself physically. He's going to have the right approach mentally. He's going to add value to us spiritually. And we're just going to be good with as many former Georgia players as we can get. Obviously, Philadelphia has used this one as Super Bowl, but Green Bay, Pittsburgh, Detroit starting to build a little bit more of that. The Chargers a little bit more of that. Like, you just see numerous NFL teams that really feel very comfortable drafting as many former Georgia guys as they can. So that idea led to a funny moment. I'm going to give you here an ESPN reporter covering the Green Bay Packers training camp, kind of relaying sort of an offhanded comment from the former Georgia defensive lineman Warren Brinson that drew, I think, a bit of an interesting reaction in NFL circles, mostly just, I think, humorous from our perspective, but perhaps for those not fully acquainted with what Brinson meant, maybe just a little bit eye-opening. Let me let you hear this as shared by ESPN, one of their reporters on the subject of Brinson and Packers training camp. Take a listen to this.
Don't mistake what rookie defensive tackle Warren Brinson is saying. He's in no way implying that NFL training camps are easy. But on a day when the Packers had one of their lightest sessions of training camp, just an hour and 40-minute practice without pads, I asked Brinson what's the biggest thing he's learned since he's been here so far. And he chuckled. He said, well, Coach Smart made camp a lot harder than it's supposed to be. He was, of course, referring to his college coach, Kirby Smart, at the University of Georgia.
So there you go. That's the statement there from Brinson. Hey, listen, all of this is pretty easy for me, he's insinuating, because our coach, Kirby Smart, made training camp harder than it's supposed to be. Now, the reaction in the NFL circles is, hold on, who's this young guy? Is he saying that he thinks NFL training camp is easy? Well, it would certainly appear that's not what Brinson was saying. But at the same time, he and all the other former Georgia players don't shy away from the fact. In fact, if you go back to some of the stuff that was said during the NFL Combine and has been said for years, they sell this in a big way. What we do at Georgia, the way we've been pushed at Georgia, it does make it when we get to the NFL that this is going to be, even if not quite easy, because the game of football is never easy at any level, it's going to be easier for us because what we have done at Georgia. And so I think that Brinson's words are exactly right as far as I'm concerned on that. It's also interesting to note that there's a little bit of an interpretation that goes on with that of, hold on, when he says Kirby Smart made it harder than it's supposed to be, in a roundabout way that almost doesn't quite sound like a compliment, even though I think he means that way, because it's not, boy, this fall camp, man, we loved it. It was the best experience we ever had. We were getting pushed, but we were glad we were. Maybe in retrospect you think that way, but I can promise you, and many of you have kind of done your own version of this with your own high school or whatever else, when you're going through it, you don't necessarily feel that way. And we've heard enough Georgia players over the years admit this, especially when they're new, fresh arriving at Georgia, that that being pushed that way, being challenged that way, makes them kind of wonder, is this even for me? Even some of the best players who've been at UGA to a degree sort of feel that way of how well am I even equipped for this, just given how hard the challenge is in the early going of all of that. That is something we've seen before. And I think that Brinson, with his statement, as reported by the ESPN guy here, sort of tells us just how true that really is. And in addition to that, thinking about that, it sort of gets me thinking about this Georgia camp this year in particular. On Saturday, we're told Georgia had its first padded practice of fall camp, and these practices are ongoing here throughout the end of the month before Georgia gets ready to begin the season here coming up in just a few weeks. And we know how arduous the grind's going to be. We know how intense it's going to be because, as Brinson says, it's sort of always been that way, certainly throughout the entirety of his Georgia career. We also, this is something I talked to Terrence Edwards about this on Thursday. I've talked to, Jake Fromm on Tuesday. I think it's also perhaps true, my theory has been, that this year's Georgia fall camp may be even more intense than it's ever been before because of what Kirby Smart has specifically said their key points of emphasis are going to be. That this is a Georgia team that sort of prides itself on toughness, that is looking to be tougher than it's ever been before, more intense, more challenging around the lines of scrimmage than it's ever been before. Because as Kirby Smart was very clear at pointing out during spring practice a couple of months ago, this is the biggest deficiency he sort of saw in his team from 2024. And when Kirby Smart spoke to the media last week, when it comes to kind of, I guess, re-emphasizing that theme again. Certainly it sounds like that's what Kirby Smart wants this fall camp to be all about on both the offensive and defensive line of scrimmage, running the ball more effectively, just being more productive with the running game, and making sure Georgia's opponents aren't able to do the same. Very candid from Kirby Smart when he spoke to reporters last week. Let's take a listen to that right now.
Yeah, I want to see improvement. I want to see experience. I want to see depth building. We talk about it a lot. We've talked about it a lot in our messaging about what the standard is at Georgia in terms of it's not the number of runs as much as it is the efficiency of the runs. It's not the yardage given up rushing as much as it is the yards per carry. We want to be very productive in those two areas. Our best team since we've been here, they've been able to run the ball when they have to run it, and they've been able to stop the run when they have to stop it. And that looks different in every game. So what do I want to see out of those guys, though? I want to see improvement. I want to see buy-in. It's a culture thing. It's like you get what you demand, and we're going to demand that we stop it and that we're able to do it and run it.
So do you get the point that I'm making here, that Warren Brinson tells people around the NFL, listen, in a roundabout way, this practice is a lot easier when I'm used to during a fall camp because Kirby Smart made practice not as tough as it needed to be, but as Brinson said, tougher than it was supposed to be. He was pushing us beyond even what we thought we needed to do just because that's how tough he wanted us to be. That's Brinson's take on previous Georgia fall camps. Now we've got Kirby Smart saying, we're going to demand to be better stopping the run. That's physicality up front defensively. We're going to demand more production of our running game. Once again, that's physicality up front with your offensive line. That's a big ongoing battle with the lines of scrimmage. So for these Georgia fall camps that have a history of being so tough, when now it's about how much do you want to buy into the physicality we're asking for, all of a sudden I think it's a reasonable working theory that this may be the toughest fall camp that maybe Georgia's ever had, as bold of a statement as that sounds like, just given the specific areas that Kirby Smart says he wants to work on. And I think in this particular case, buy-in, B-U-I, buy-in is a very interesting phrase because here's the thing. I think when it comes to, well, we want to play football physically, we're going to hear from a bunch of football coaches today. We hear from a bunch of college football coaches during the season. Of course, every coach wants to be physical. And if every coach had every team at all levels of the game being as physical as they wanted them to be, well, just think about this for a moment. If that was true, then in a roundabout way, football would essentially be a stalemate, right? No one would have the advantage over somebody else. Every coach seeks physicality. Every player wants to believe himself to be the toughest, certainly tougher than whoever he's lining up across. And if that was, broadly speaking, true across the board, then football would basically just be a quagmire where nobody had the advantage over anybody else. But what makes football a fascinating thing to watch, I think an important part of the development of young men for those who participate in it, what makes football fascinating is that while everyone says they want to buy into the physicality required to be successful, there are some that are just able to dig a little deeper, reach down a little lower, and find something in them that allows them to buy in even more. And we believe that good coaches can help with that. And so that's sort of what it comes down to. Kirby Smart says, are you willing to buy in more on both sides of the ball right now, commit yourself to a tougher fall camp than the competition's perhaps willing to do, and make yourself better because of it? And we're about to find out. Is this lip service? Is this just a thing you say you want? Or do your actions show how committed you truly are? And this is, of course, what separated Georgia from others in the past. We believe it still can here in 2025, which sort of leads us to the one position group in particular that may be shouldering the biggest load with all this, the Georgia offensive line. They were, after all, one of a couple position groups most maligned from Georgia last season, most feeling the responsibility of improvement this season, that Georgia offensive line, of course. And in the same general conversation of buy-in and commitment and demanding excellence, Kirby Smart in particular talked about what that means for the offensive line. Here's Kirby Smart again.
I think them gel, them play with a chip on their shoulder. We talk about playing with an edge. Passion, fire, energy, right? PFE is one of the things we're looking for. No greater position that you possess passion, fire, and energy than O-line. There is something about breaking someone's will or saying I have to move you from point A to point B. And movement is exactly that. Movement is what creates run game.
I love the statement that Smart says there about breaking someone's will. I also like the way that Smart says it. You know, breaking is one of those words that has a lot of hard consonants. You can really emphasize that word. And Kirby, you can sort of tell that it means something to him because he emphasizes that word just a little bit more significantly. And there's a implied meaning that goes beyond just the explicit statement of those words. Kirby Smart really likes that aspect of football. And it kind of brings me back, and I'll wrap this conversation up by saying this. It sort of brings me back to something I talked to you about on, I think it was Friday's show, that overall I thought the tone of the introductory press conference from Kirby was, it was an interesting tone. Let me just say it that way. A lot of questions about, gosh, can you believe it's been 10 years? And a lot of almost like retrospective looking back. And I think some of that perhaps belies the true sense of urgency that exists around Georgia football. that there has never been a more interesting thing involving Georgia football, more so than the present moment that we're in. And that Georgia was not satisfied a year ago with how its season came to an end. Yes, it's proud to have beaten Texas twice. Yes, it's proud to have won the deepest SEC, most challenging SEC of all time. And yet ultimately, the season still came to a premature conclusion. Georgia lost in the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. And yes, Kirby Smart, still very much in the prime of his coaching career, is just as driven as ever to have a better conclusion to this season. And how Georgia's seeking to do that is the most Georgia way possible. Getting better on the defensive line to make that an impenetrable unit. Being better with the offensive line to get back to the habit of shoving opposing players around on a regular basis. A version of Kirby Smart's Georgia that really feels like what this program has been like at the very best of Kirby Smart's time. It seems like that's what Georgia's attempting to return to, that is maybe the larger theme and narrative of what Georgia football will be about this season. The work to make that happen is going on behind closed doors here over the course of the next few weeks. But the fruit of that effort, the benefit of that labor, it'll be on display for all of us to see coming up in just a few weeks' time. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and we're glad to have you with us. We're live here today from the Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic Kickoff Luncheon. Many of you watch us at 10 a.m. Most of you that watch on video watch on demand after the fact. However you tune in, we're just glad you found a way that works for you. That includes the radio there on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref and podcasts, Apple, Spotify, all kinds of fun things there on that. By the way, kind of a cool announcement as it relates to some of that here coming up before we're done today that I'm really proud of. We'll give that to you coming up in just a little bit. Prior to that, though, let me say thank you to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia who make all of this possible here today. Got a chance to run into my buddy Brian from Pella Window and Door of Georgia last week. We were at an event together, and it's always great to catch up with him and the entire team there from Pella because you can understand something. You know, obviously my livelihood, the way that I feed my family is dependent on our sponsors. But there's an extra sense of pride I have from knowing that the folks who've been partners with us here at DawgNation Daily for such a long time are just good people, and you don't get better people than the folks from Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Really family-oriented, just incredible pillars in our community, and I do mean that literally. So I'm very proud of Pella, and I'm encouraging you to reach out to them here today as well, especially if it's time to upgrade your windows. Now, normally when I say this, just to be completely honest with you, we're talking about upgrading windows and all the stuff that kind of goes along with that. We usually reference the fact that it's very hot here at the moment, or at least during the season, and that you're trying to keep that air conditioning on the inside of your house and kind of everything that kind of goes along with that. Well, as you know, it's not quite so hot here today. So the typical script of, boy, it's hot outside, and you got to keep that AC on the inside of your house. That's not quite the way it is here right now. But the thing that you should know is that while it's perhaps not super hot here at the moment, it will be hot again very soon. So still very important to not waste a bunch of money in your energy bills, or just make your home look better on the outside. Or how about this? When it rains as much, there was a moment this weekend when it came up a huge storm. It's raining all over the place. If you don't have properly sealed windows, if you've got old windows or kind of past their life expectancy, well, now all of a sudden you've got the moisture, the water kind of creeping into your house. That's a mess. You don't want that. You want the outside to stay outside. You want the inside to feel the way that it's supposed to. That's what the gorgeous product from Pella Window and Door of Georgia is all about. Not just making your house look better, making your house feel better as well. And if you haven't really explored window technology, which I'm guessing you probably haven't if you haven't quite needed them, if you haven't explored this in a while, it's worth investigating just to sort of find out the really creative ways that Pella gets the most out of the windows that you put in your home. And listen, you want to be a great homeowner. You want to take the best possible care you can of your home. Well, upgrading the windows is perhaps one of the best ways you can do that. That has a positive impact on your resale value maybe. Certainly makes your home feel better and can have a significant savings for you when it comes to your energy bills, things like that. You need to be thinking more about your windows. In other words, and Pella wants to help you do that. So I want you to reach out to them. You can find them online, PellaGA.com/DawgNation. That's PellaGA.com/DawgNation. You can also give them a call, 678-638 678-638-1429. That's 678-638-1429. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is going beyond. All right, we're having a great show here today for you. We're on remote, but still having a lot of fun. That includes Jon Stinchcomb here coming up in just a moment. Prior to that, I want to go around the doghouse, poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And I thought Saturday was a great day for us here at DawgNation. It was certainly a great day for Georgia football overall, as Georgia added the 31st member of its 2026 recruiting class when the defensive lineman from Clark Central High School, Anthony Lonon Jr., made his pledge to UGA. Kaylee Manziel, Jeff Sintel, my two colleagues, did a wonderful job covering that for you on video. Perhaps, though, you missed the moment when Lonon became the latest to choose the Dogs. So here's a part of Around the Doghouse presented by Dr. Pepper. Let's go back and relive that moment right now, because I thought that Lonon was incredibly poignant with the meaning of this moment for him. Georgia getting itself a good football player, but as you can tell from Lonon's words here, also a fine young man, too. Let's go back and relive it here right now.
First off, I would like to give all thanks to God. I truly believe that my talent is God-given, and it was just my job to capitalize off of that. And I would also like to give credit, of course, to both of my parents. My mom, I don't know if y'all can see, but she's the best leader I know, more than anybody. And then my dad, at the same time, he's the most hardest working person I know, and he still found time to come out and coach and help me out. So I want to clap it up for them. Yeah. Along with them, I want to thank my entire family. I have a great support system, something I'm very thankful for, something a lot of people, especially in this area, don't have. So I'm very grateful for everybody behind me and all the other family that couldn't make it. Last but not least, I want to thank my former teachers, coaches, teammates, of course, all in the back, recording and supporting me. Yeah. Principals, everybody. Coach Ward for making this entire thing happen. But with that being said, drum roll. I will be taking my talents to the University of Georgia.
Awesome moment there from Anthony Lonon Jr. As you can tell, a fine young man in addition to a very good football player. And look, I think there's a practical reality associated with putting a roster together. If we're just being honest, every now and then, if the talent is significant enough, maybe you take a little bit of a risk on a guy you're not quite so sure he's going to fit in all that well. This is true at all levels of football. That if the talent's significant enough, maybe you roll the dice every now and then because you need elite talent to be as successful as you can be. But that being said, the nucleus of your football team has to be good dudes. If it's not, you pay the price. There is no shortcut on putting a roster together that includes guys that kind of come together. And, Kirby Smart said this about the offensive line a minute ago, how well they gel together. It takes good dudes to gel well together. That doesn't mean that every single person in your roster necessarily has to be a choir boy. We know in football it doesn't always quite work that way, if we're being honest. But, boy, the nucleus of your team better be good guys, good dudes from good families. It better be that. And Anthony Lonon clearly right there demonstrates he has a chance at Georgia to certainly be one of those guys. He also brings value as a player, including, I think, kind of an impressive degree of versatility. Our Jeff Sintel on Saturday told us more about that.
They see his 6'2" frame, 265 pounds, great motor. They see him playing a 3-tech all the way to a 9-tech. Now, that's kind of an incredible player, Kaylee, kind of a unicorn. Not many folks that can do that. Maybe he plays the 3-tech on passing downs, but you have a very versatile defender, the 7th defensive lineman now in the class. Georgia now has 31 commitments, and they get a homegrown dog.
So I can tell you this to kind of echo what Jeff Sintel is saying. The one thing I try to do is I stay in my lane. I'm not a scout. Don't pretend to be one. I'm not going to leave this job to go be hired as some area scout for an NFL team. That's just not the role that I function in life. But there are people who do know a lot more about this kind of stuff than I do, and I try to talk to them on a regular basis to sort of basically steal what they know. And people who know more than I do about the sort of football evaluations required to determine who can and can't play the game will tell you that they think that Lonon's ability here far outpaces the level of attention he's gotten as a recruit. Now, he is essentially a composite 4-star now, so the recruiting industry is also kind of taking note of this. but there are a lot of people in my life who I do trust their football evaluations far more than mine, Jeff Sintel, of course, included. They will tell you that they have long since believed Lonon to be a very good football player. Georgia beating Georgia Tech for this one on Saturday. That thought to be a really good thing. Great coverage from DawgNation. Go to the DawgNation YouTube page, and you can kind of relive the full video. It's really only about 10 minutes long. This is a little bit of a different kind of video for us, kind of shot in sort of the aftermath of all of this. A good, fun evaluation of Lonon, a chance to sort of relive the moment when he picked Georgia, but also a chance to hear from some of his family. And, you know, Dave Perna, of course, the great former Georgia baseball player and Georgia baseball coach, now working as the football coach at Clark Central. Kind of an interesting, fun story. A deep-rooted community there, right there, kind of on campus at UGA at Clark Central. DawgNation had great coverage of that on Saturday. So if you want more of that, check out our DawgNation YouTube page, and you can certainly get it. We'll also make that around the doghouse poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. I was talking a moment ago about our great sponsors. I'll tell you this quickly. Our guy Jonathan, who's our great friend from Dr. Pepper, to give you an idea of like how closely tied most of our people are, our great partners with like Georgia football and Georgia football fans. So Jonathan texted me the other day. It was like, showed me all these pictures of like new UGA apparel that he was into and stuff that he was looking to buy for the upcoming season. And once again, I just love, as a Georgia fan who talks every day to Georgia fans, that so many of our partners are already kind of getting their game day fits together and getting that all scripted out and ready to go for the upcoming fall. That's just sort of the people we work with on a regular basis. And man, I love that so much. And of course, I also love the rich one-of-a-kind flavor of Dr. Pepper. I'm here remotely today. That means I probably have to wait for a while to get my first Dr. Pepper of the day, but you better believe I'll be looking forward to that great treat a little bit later on. And for many of you, you're enjoying that here this summer too, including the Dr. Pepper Blackberry, but Dr. Pepper Blackberry Zero Sugar. Wherever you're buying your groceries, you're picking some of that up right now. Of course, if you more like the more traditional flavors, that's obviously a lot of fun too. We love having Dr. Pepper a part of Around the Doghouse here each and every week on DawgNation Daily. Always a great thing to be able to do. Okay, before we're done, there were a couple of strange moments this week involving SEC teams and their video staffs and some of the stuff coming out of practice. There's a way for a lot of this kind of thing to go wrong, and this week around the SEC, perhaps a couple of examples of that being true. We'll give that to you here in a little bit. Also, kind of a fun announcement that I'm personally proud of. We'll make that for you before we're done here today, too. But for now, on everything going on around Georgia football, as the football season, for all intents and purposes, is essentially here. Let's talk to Jon Stinchcomb today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella, Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Always thrilled to have Jon Stinchcomb on the show. Such great insight. And John, let me work backwards here for a moment. We just heard Anthony Lonon Jr. in the midst of choosing Georgia, speak about what was meaningful to him, but the process leading towards that. Obviously, family, very important to him. And look, we can't sugarcoat this. There is a certain aspect of football that's, you got to have the requisite athleticism. I totally get that. We believe, of course, Lonon does. But there's also this thing of if you can find elite athletes who are also good dudes, it's just better. I think your era at Georgia football is a testament to that. A lot of good guys helped you all, kind of break what was a long SEC championship drought for Georgia. I think the Kirby Smart era has been a testament to that, too, of you can be an NFL talent, but if you're an NFL talent who also kind of comes from a good family, for instance, there's just some real value in that. And so every time Georgia gets a good player who seems like it's a good dude, I don't know, I kind of find myself celebrating that just a little bit more, don't you?
Absolutely. And locker room and culture is a big piece, an ingredient for success. And you have to have talent, absolutely. But it comes with the balance of, you want the right guys in the room. You want a character balance and that to be a part of the equation when you're evaluating guys that you want to be a part of your program. And I remember, so Anthony Lonon Sr. Came to Georgia the same class as my brother, and they both played in the Georgia-Florida high school all-star game, and watching him play was a real treat. I know he made quite an impact in that game. It was memorable for me. So to see a legacy player come to the University of Georgia and commit, and sometimes it's hard when you grow up in you go to school in the same town as the college that you're going to attend. Sometimes folks want a little something different. So I think it's a testament to him and his family, and obviously the program that Georgia is, that still is able to draw high-level talent and high-level character individuals to be a part of the program. It's fun to watch.
No, I think that's really well said. And I would never pretend to tell Kirby Smart how to go about his recruiting business. He's obviously thought more about that topic than I've ever thought about probably any topic. And yet it always kind of fascinates me that Georgia is certainly willing to go about its recruiting process in a very challenging way. They are in a talent-rich state, but oftentimes, some of its top targets will be guys all the way across the country, or at least in a different state. And yet I've always been kind of the belief that, yeah, you can go out and chase guys like that, but boy, you better rack up some easy wins, right? You better get some layups along the way. I'm not suggesting that Lonon was necessarily an easy win, but as you said, this is a guy whose parents both have a deep legacy to the University of Georgia, that this is the sort of thing, player playing in the backyard of UGA. I think racking up these wins with guys who, because of family ties, because of geographic location, the fact that they may be more predisposed to want to be at Georgia, I think scoring these sorts of wins are an important thing to make sure you've got enough, I guess, emotional capital to go after the recruiting battles that require a little bit more of a heavy lift, or a little bit more of a more difficult needle to thread. I just think you've got to rack up these, especially if you're in a state like Georgia that provides this level of talent of people who kind of already predisposed to like you. I just think you've got to rack up as many of these easy wins as you can to give yourself a little bit of a chance to kind of go out and pull some more difficult ones along the way.
Yeah, I would just phrase it a little bit different. I don't think you have to overlook some easy wins, some low-hanging fruit, and say, here's a kid that has a high level of talent, but also is one of Georgia's own. He is coming to the University of Georgia because he wants to be a part of the program. Yeah. I get it. In today's day and age, a lot of players are looking at platforms and catalysts that can extend their career and become professional football players. And Georgia has certainly distinguished themselves as a program that can develop talent and get players to that next level. And so you're able to recruit on a national scale. I think it's also important to realize, and fans appreciate this, that when it means more to a player, when they're not just playing for themselves, I'm not saying that a lot of guys are, but at the same time, I probably am. And Georgia's not exclusive to that. But when players want to play for the school, I'm coming to the University of Georgia because I've always wanted to be a dog. I think we see that. I think you look back at guys like Richard LeCount. I mean, you watch the way he played and you're like, man, he one super talented player, and he wanted to be a dog. And he's not alone. And I don't know how I happened to single out one guy out of, team after team of players that wanted to be a part of the University of Georgia because they wanted to be a Bulldog and wear the red and black. I just think that it stands out when you see players that play with passion, that want to be a part of that particular program. I think that sometimes they're able to extend past just what their athletic ability and what the school can offer them, and it creates a little bit of synergy.
So in the case of Lonon, he chooses Georgia over Georgia Tech. I want to use that as a transition to another topic. John, I'm not even sure how much you've even noticed this, but I think there's been a very interesting reaction to something among Georgia fans over the course of the last few days. You're aware that this year's Georgia Tech rivalry game has essentially been sold by Tech to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and the rivalry game, long known as clean old-fashioned hate, is now going to have a sponsor. They're going to call it like the Gridiron Classic or something like that. It's basically officially going to be known by a completely different name because of some sponsorship dollars paid to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and that's one of the reasons why MBS wanted to buy this from Georgia Tech. I have some thoughts on this. As a business-oriented football guy, what are your thoughts on, I guess, sponsorship names for classic rivalry games? This will be the same deal for the Georgia-Florida game coming up very soon in Atlanta, too. What do you make of all of this?
Welcome to the business of college football. There's not a single stone that's been left unturned that for a potential to monetize this game, and whether it's from players or the universities. You look at individual games and rivalries. It would be naive to think that anything would be safe from the greedy paws of where can we find the next dollar. And you look at this and you say, well, of course, if you can monetize a rivalry, if players can monetize their name, image, and likeness, if you can find ways to support your programs, I mean, there's got to be ways to fund those NIL deals and the collectives. And it only makes sense for a lot of players or a lot of teams to look at different ways to finance those deals and those collectives. And once again, I think it's fans that are left scratching their heads going, let's not kill the golden goose. And you look at this and you say, there's aspects of this game that are changing in ways that don't appreciate and respect and show honor for what has established and built the game up to what it is now, what has allowed these opportunities to exist. And I think there is some erosion that's occurring to that foundation, and you just have to, I guess, recognize the balance that it's going to take, the balance between progress and the evolution of the game without totally rescinding and eroding the base that has created these very opportunities to exist. Rivalries, the clean old-fashioned hate or the cocktail party of Georgia, Florida, I think as you continue to put different names on it, and you slap it and you make it look like a NASCAR with all the different sponsorships, and you get it, but you also have to recognize that it comes at a cost, and that's the fan affiliation, which is the complete and total foundation for which all this is built upon.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to phrase this. And I would say, speaking as a fan to fans, that of all the things like this that might encroach on our various traditions, I would say this is one that I'm least afraid of. And just to be honest, John, this may be more honest than I should be, like whoever sponsored this particular game, they're not paying me any money, so I don't feel beholden to ever use their name at all. We'll keep calling this clean old-fashioned hate the same way we keep calling the game down in Florida the cocktail party, even though it hasn't officially been known as that for a very long time. That of all the things that fans should be worried about, I think this is one that they probably need to be worried about a little bit less, because I don't care what the folks that manage the stadium or manage the Atlanta Sports Council say the game is called, or what the sponsor pays them to say the game is called. We are certainly of our own volition to sort of call it whatever we want to. And unfortunately, now in this particular case, it's Tech getting all this money, so I care about this even less. But in a couple of years, when it's Georgia getting the big payday from the same people, well, I do think, and you touch on this, is that college athletics is in a place right now where your favorite team, in this case we're talking about Georgia, but your favorite team just sort of needs the money. And so if this is the way you get the money, by playing the game in the stadium and getting the sort of sponsor thing slapped on the sort of official whatever nomenclature for the game, I think I can make peace with that because I don't have to use those words. I would say this is a little bit different than if one day Georgia ran out and the Silver Britches had some sort of like corporate logo sort of stitched to the side of that. Well, that's the sort of thing it becomes a little harder to ignore. But in the grand scheme of the sort of, monetization of college athletics and the clearly sort of unfettered march towards a full-fledged business, I would say this particular thing, at least in my eyes, encroaches on the average fan probably less than I think it's been treated as thus far, because none of us are beholden to call the game whatever the sponsor is choosing to call it, unless they want to pay us some money personally to do so, right?
Right. And we'll see it. I mean, you'll see as the advertisements for the games and the announcers that have to call it, they have to use the nomenclature. But for the average fan, we're going to know this as, the Georgia Tech rivalry, the clean old fashioned hate.
Yeah.
You can't get away from those aspects of it. And I think you hit on something else. I wouldn't be surprised if down the road you see practice jerseys with a someone else's, a company, a sponsor's name on the shoulder patch. You see it in the NFL, and that's the model that's trying to get replicated at the collegiate level. So that's coming. I think what you don't want to do is to see it on game day. And, hopefully there are some things that are held in special regard. And obviously the silver breeches and the red and black and what comes out of the tunnel between the hedges and that uniform doesn't get marred by putting some third party name across the a patch on a shoulder pad one day. I think we would all regret that decision being made, but that seems to be the direction that this is headed. And hopefully there are safeguards that are put in place that protect some aspects of it that are kind of held holy.
Let me make a sort of small final point on this, and then I want to hit one more topic with you before we go. Like, by getting the sort of money that Georgia could get from playing a game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I don't know how tangibly beneficial fans will notice that to be, but I do think it's going to really matter on the margin. In other words, the millions of dollars that Georgia gets paid when it plays the Georgia-Florida game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I'm not quite so sure they go out and, say, for lack of a better way of saying it, buy a quarterback with that sort of money. But I do think it can kind of continue to make Georgia feel like what Georgia's felt like to the players who are part of the program. And John, as a former NFL guy, I think you'll attest to this. In a league where it was about your paycheck, the sense that I get is a lot of NFL teams choose to go a little cheap with how they sort of treat players in other aspects, accommodations for travel, for instance, the sort of touchy-feely aspects of what you get with your team facility, because it is a professional league. Your paycheck is your prize. And so every year they do these surveys, and there are some NFL teams that get really dark marks from the players who play there for just how they sort of treat the players from a quality of life standpoint. Whereas I think the sense that I get, the overall quality of life at a place like Georgia is pretty good. Nutrition staff, training staff, comfortable environment around the program. And I think some of this kind of stuff may sort of keep that same feeling alive, enough extra money that you don't have to start cutting services, for instance, which I think could have a little bit of an intangible value to recruiting that it can't exactly be traced with a straight line. Does that make sense?
It does. I think you look back at the early 2000s and it was such an arms race. I mean, you're looking at lazy rivers getting put in, and, all the facilities was the way that teams were trying to get an edge. Those days are gone. I don't think you're going to see that investment in facilities. And similar to what the NFL had for a number of years, they were investing in players. We've got that was $1 billion industry. So is college football. So is college athletics, just across the board. And so when you're looking at ways to slice the pie, well, if players are going to get a piece of that, going to get a cut for the very first time of that pie, not of third-party NIL direct deals. We're talking about they're going to get a share of the athletic department's revenue, then that's got to come from some other places. And those facilities, the travel, the quality of food, that's what we saw, areas that were cut in professional sports. Well, now this is a professional league. So if we're going to see it as such, what I think you're going to have to see is a modeling from the NFL, where players didn't really have that leverage to say, our facilities stink, but I'm also going to the place that paid me the most, and I feel like I can win at that place. And that's the same kind of verbiage that we're hearing out of players now that are leaving high school of, they're not acknowledging it fully, but one, they do want to get paid. I think we can all understand that. And two, they want to go to a place where they can win. And lower on that list is the facilities or the quality of transportation or the meals and what the NFL did, what the NFL players have done recently is they came out with those surveys, and it was ingenious, of quality of care, quality of day-to-day experience, quality of coaching, quality of facilities, and they were able to kind of rank them and make it known. And then the media picked up on it, and they make it broadcast of, hey, of the 32 teams in the NFL, these facilities were deemed the worst. The lunch was the worst here. The weight room, all those things, the quality of the training staff. So medical care, and it was put on a scale, and a national voice was lent to the players. Well, sooner or later, that's going to happen for the collegiate players, because what used to be spent in those areas is now going to be spent on the collective and the NIL deals. So it's going to come at a cost, and I don't think that will be felt in the next year or two, but I think you broadcast out a little further, and you're going to see more articles written about, yes, I got paid at this school, but, this X, Y, and Z, part of my experience has certainly paid for or coming at that expense, because they're putting them dollars elsewhere.
Let me finish with this, and I can't remember if you and I talked about this last week or not, but it's certainly been, I think, a point that's been heavy on my mind the last few days, is that Kirby Smart's sort of legendary for how hard he makes Georgia's fall camps. The theory is training hard now makes the season a little easier. Players buy into it, we're told, because by doing that, they're just more marketable to the NFL because of the rigor they've been a part of. And frankly, the NFL is then a little easier for them too. I guess Warren Brinson made mention of something related to that up there in Green Bay. My theory is, given how, and Kirby's not always the most specific guy when he doesn't want to be. Smart knows how to sort of talk around a subject if he doesn't want to take it head on. So therefore, when Kirby chooses to be specific, I would be led to believe he's choosing that for a very significant reason. And Smart, for months now, I'm talking about spring practice into now, the month that the season officially, begins in, he has made it clear. There are points of emphasis, harping on it, he said. Stopping the run, being better with the run. Well, John, we know the brute physicality required to be good at running the football and preventing your opponent from being able to do so. That would lead me to believe, just sort of using sort of an inductive process here, that this may be a tougher fall camp than they've ever even had before. If they're this emphatic about being, being better on both lines of scrimmage, these legendary Georgia fall camps, maybe they're even tougher. Pretty clearly, you don't have to look very far to kind of find out what they hope to get out of these weeks, right?
Yeah, I would see that in the drills that they're going to run. Now, you look at the calendar and you see a lack of two-a-days that occurred like they did in years past, and the weather. So the X factor of having to be out in the heat and borderline 100-plus degree weather is not going to exist for them, at least not this week, and probably going to be indoors based on the rain. So that helps, but the physicality of camp, you can only improve in those areas by reps and getting kind of down and dirty. So I expect camp to be physical. There are still holes that need to be filled. So if you're going to talk about stopping the run, creating the run, that's offense, defensive line, that's box play. And there are names written in pencil and very few that are stamped in the concrete that are locked down. We know those guys are going to be in these spots. So it should be competitive. That's what you want. And it's probably going to be pretty physical camp for all these guys, especially with the number of new faces on the defensive front. You look at the edge players, and there's been a lot of transition there. So there's opportunity and new faces and an emphasis that's being placed on it by your head coach, who's publicly stating these are two areas that we need to focus on, which usually tends to express itself into a much more physical camp. And there's going to be a lot of battles across that offensive defensive line.
So let me ask you, and I apologize for keeping you long, but I am curious of your answer to this. So in the era in which you played, certainly in the college era, and I apologize for not remembering about the NFL time, I'm assuming you did have the so-called two-a-day practices. Did you ever feel like, ooh, boy, this is a lot for my body, and I'm not quite so sure how I'm holding up on this in terms of like a safety standpoint? Is it one of those things of, hey, it's better now that we're not putting guys through so much in these very hot days? Or are we missing something from football now because maybe, certainly at the NFL level, practices are far less physical, I'm led to believe, than they used to be? Is the sport better now because of that change, or is the intensity of those practices being taken away? Has that lessened the product we see on the field?
It's cost benefit. So there is a cost. It comes with, you get less reps. You don't have, especially for guys developing or learning a new system, you don't have those opportunities that you just get less reps. So if you get 60 plays in a practice and you get 2 practices, well, in a day, you just cut that in half if we're not having 2-a-days anymore. Now, the benefit is, yes, there are many weeks where you're feeling like, I don't even know how I can go out there today, but yet you find a way. And I'm sure it's putting you at risk as a player of going, I'm kind of redlining and I'm staying in the red before I go right back out to practice. And there are injuries that come along with that type scenario. So hopefully one of the benefits is you're healthier and you don't have that wear and tear on your body. But the cost is you just don't get the reps. And for guys that are battling, guys that are developing, those become pretty invaluable. And you look at it and you're saying, how can we find ways to get guys up to speed quicker, be a part of the program, whether it's a young player at a high school or a transfer or someone who just hasn't had there's some guys that haven't been available because of health reasons. Maybe they missed spring ball and they need to be out there to get as many reps as possible. And that if you're not having the 2-a-days and you don't have the schedule that used to extend deeper into July and you had more practices, then each rep becomes more valuable. And Warren Brinson's a great example of a guy, and there's been many who've left University of Georgia who said, the NFL practices are easier. I would attest to that same thing, but you just don't have the number of reps. So they become so much more invaluable. Each rep matters more. If I'm not getting 120 reps in a practice or in a day of practices and I only get 40 opportunities, well, if I miss 10 reps, if I get 10 minuses in that day where I have 120 reps, it doesn't look as bad as I just missed 25% of my blocks, then that's a problem. So it makes each rep more valuable and more important for these guys, but you got to still get that same level of development. It's harder to do.
Jon, I always appreciate your insight. You bring so much to the table. Your history in the game obviously makes us smarter as fans, so we appreciate that. We're inching closer to the start of the season. Georgia Fall Camp rolls on. I'll look forward to talking to you more about that again next week.
Always enjoy it, BA. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs indeed.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, really interesting from Jon Stinchcomb there. Appreciate that. And I'll go back to a topic that we addressed near the beginning of that conversation. I think the reaction to this Georgia Tech rivalry game, the sort of renaming of that for this year and the sponsorship involvement, there are a lot of things as a fan that make me nervous. This is not one of those things that makes me as nervous as some of the other stuff around college athletics, just simply because none of us are going to be compelled to call this anything that we don't want to. And I'm not even mad at them. I mean, honestly, it's like a pretty good business situation, right? Mercedes-Benz Stadium clearly sees the benefit of having the game. The sponsor likes the idea of being connected to it. I'm neither mad at the Sports Council or the company for wanting to make this into a way of raising awareness for them and generating income for the city. I'm not bothered by that. But in terms of changing traditions as we've known them to accommodate that, well, we're free to make our own choices on that. Most of us are going to choose to continue to honor the tradition, no matter what the technical name might be for this particular year. Now, with that said, speaking of great sponsors, let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And there is so much going on around Royal Caribbean here this year, and it's amazing. Folks are already, for instance, excited about the debut of the Royal Beach Club in Nassau by the end of the year. People are, and here's the thing you got to understand, is that with Royal Caribbean, because essentially every ship is sold out, and that's true. They just had corporate had an earnings call the other day, and that was one of the things that they continue to tout is the fact that their ships are basically sailing full every time they sail. So what Royal Caribbean, for those who enjoy Royal Caribbean cruises, such as myself, many of you do too, you're aware that thinking about your next Royal Caribbean cruise vacation is kind of a long-term proposition. You're thinking now about a year from now, or you're thinking now about the holiday season, or early 2026. You're not thinking now about a cruise you want to take 3 weeks from now. You're thinking now about a cruise you might want to take several months from now. And so folks are already booking their chance to be on the Royal Beach Club in Nassau, despite the fact it doesn't open for a few more months. People are already thinking about, spring break cruises, for instance, on Utopia of the Seas, Star of the Seas, Icon of the Seas, great ships like that. Despite the fact in the case of Star of the Seas, it's not even having its first sailing until a couple of more weeks. So my encouragement to you is, if you hear me talking about a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, be thinking now about the travel you might want to be a part of before the end of the year or into next year. And our great friend Jessica Slater is standing by to help you out with that. You can email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. That is jslater@dreamvacations.com. You can also give her a call at 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. And enjoy a wonderful vacation here with Royal Caribbean here this year. You're going to really be glad you did that, and our good friend Jessica Slater can help you out with all of that. All right, a couple of stories to give you, and then I've got a fun announcement before we wrap things up here today. Let me start with this. A couple of weird things from SEC teams on video over the course of the last couple of days. One of these I don't want to joke about at all, and one of these I think is a little bit more open to have some fun with. So there's a guy, some of you may know him, I think he's a Barstool guy, Jack McGuire, I believe his name is. So I believe he was the first one to identify that LSU, after having shared a practice video, went back and changed the first frame in the video. Sometimes what you do to make a video more interesting, our Cody Chavin's really good at this, just sort of splice in the regular footage with some sort of scene setter stuff of, here's an image from the practice field, for instance. And one of the things that apparently showed at the very beginning of the video is the tall coach's tower that you see around a lot of practice fields. And then, as Jack pointed out on X, that was then edited out of the video. Obviously, I think the assumption here is this relates back to a story involving Brian Kelly's Notre Dame program when Kelly was still in South Bend, of a Notre Dame staffer who lost their life because up in a tower, windy, stormy conditions. I'm not an expert on that story. I don't live in South Bend, Indiana. I can't tell you what caused that, but it was obviously a tragic day that day for Notre Dame, of course. And LSU did not like the tower in the video, you'd presume, that seemingly called back that memory in people's minds. As I said before, I won't pretend to know what happened there on that, but LSU did not like the comparison, I reckon, that video image was going to bring up, which maybe in some respects is reasonable, but this is the sort of, I don't know, there's a level of awkwardness sometimes that kind of goes on around Brian Kelly at LSU. This feels like another example of that. It may have been in good taste to take this frame out of the video, but it's also, if you're familiar with like the Streisand effect, that by taking the frame out, leaving it open for some sort of social media person to recognize, well, now you've just somehow brought more attention to it, and it makes it seem like you feel like you've got, some sort, just, it just sort of brings back up, let me just say it this way, it brings back up a story that I'm guessing Brian Kelly would rather not talk about anymore. And so it's just another example of what sort of feels like a little bit of an awkward tenure for Brian Kelly at LSU. As I said before, that's a serious situation involving the loss of life. You don't want to necessarily make fun of that, but it was something that happened. On a more lighthearted note, there was also the situation involving Tennessee, where, as you are aware of, they are going through a quarterback competition. Nico Iamaleava is at UCLA. Aguilar, who had been at UCLA, now is at Tennessee. You got a couple of guys who've been with the Tennessee program. The three of them are competing for the Tennessee starting quarterback job, and at least one of them threw an interception in a recent Tennessee practice. But we don't know who it was, because in the video that Tennessee shared, we got the frame of this, we'll show you. In the video that Tennessee shared, they showed the highlight of the defensive back making the interception, apparently not Boo Carter, but they showed the highlight of the interception, but the quarterback who threw the ball was blurred out. Y'all, what are we doing here? Like, why are college training camps this locked down, as if there would be some sort of egregious embarrassment associated with well, a quarterback threw an interception, so therefore that guy must not be very good, and he's not going to have a chance win the starting quarterback job. This just feels way too try hard to me to manage a story that honestly doesn't need managing. And we just talked to Jon Stinchcomb a good bit about like NFL training camps. Another way that NFL training camps are very different than college fall camps is that NFL media watches a lot of these. There's a lot of information released from them. The players that are playing are essentially treated like adults, which I guess they are older than college players. So maybe that sort of speaks to part of the difference. Like, for instance, the other day, I live in the Atlanta area. Michael Penix allegedly had a very bad performance in some sort of measured scrimmage of some kind, didn't complete very many passes. Those stats were published and reported on by some in the media. And I think the general feeling of Falcon fans is, who cares? Shrug it off. It's a practice. For a Tennessee quarterback, if you don't ever throw an interception during practice, well, that means you're not taking enough risks, right? Like, there's something to be said for being careful during a game. But honestly, if you don't let it rip during practice, right, you're not going to be able to let it rip when the games actually take place. So Tennessee's need to blur this out feels like a little too try hard for me. But nonetheless, a couple of examples of videos from various SEC teams post-practice that kind of go viral, I would say, for the wrong reasons. Let me finish with this. There was a story at ESPN.com other day. Heather Dinich wrote it, which I know some of y'all have a certain kind of feeling about her. But nonetheless, Dinich wrote the story, and in her telling of this, 32 teams in college football can make the college football playoff. According to her, 11 of those reside in the SEC. So this is, if we kind of reverse engineer that, basically according to the folks at ESPN, there are like 5 SEC teams that don't begin the year with some form of playoff aspiration. I guess we'll say it's Arkansas, Mississippi State, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and one more that I'm forgetting about in the midst of all, Missouri, I guess. 5 teams in the SEC that can't make the playoff. The other 11 probably could. Now, I might squabble with a couple of those, but I would say that broadly speaking, this is at least directionally accurate. And this is an example of something I sort of say semi-frequently, which is there's a lot about the current state of college football that I don't really like. In particular, I mean, I think I've railed on the college football playoff selection committee more than anybody. I was hammering this body well before it became fashionable. Now you pretty much hear that everywhere. We've been doing that for a long time. So even within the universe of the college football playoff, that there's plenty that I don't like. I would have to say, though, can we agree that having 11 teams in the SEC, if it's true, and I don't necessarily think it's wildly untrue, if it is true, doesn't that in a roundabout way make the season a little bit more interesting? Now, we're not neutral observers here. What really matters to us is Georgia going to make it and what happens to Georgia once it gets there. I get all of that. But if teams that haven't been close in this conversation for most of their program history, in the case of, like, say, Ole Miss, South Carolina, if they're a part of this, or teams that haven't been there in a while, Auburn, Florida, Texas A&M's kind of its own type of, category on that, just given how little program success they've enjoyed. If these teams can begin the year with some sort of reasonable aspect of playoff aspiration, does that make the storylines in college ball a little richer? Within the SEC, the plot lines a little thicker and deeper? I'd suggest it kind of does. And it's one of the reasons we say, as you get to this part of the calendar, when the games themselves actually get ready to begin, the games themselves are still really good. The action we see on the field is still really compelling. The committee that choose the playoff teams, they're frankly oblivious to this. They wouldn't know a good team from a bad team. They have no real ability to tell the difference. But we do, and we enjoy the action. And the overall depth of the SEC is another example of that. And speaking of the SEC, we'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. As we get ready to wrap up here today and say goodbye to all of you, we'll get ready to throw you a golden shoe. Very proud to say that today, as I talk to you, this is the 10th anniversary, the official start date of DawgNation.com, going back one full decade ago. My start date for DawgNation Daily was slightly later than that, within the couple of weeks or so. But this is when DawgNation began. So we put a post out on social media earlier today. We'll show you that as a part of our golden shoe here today. And starting tomorrow on our show and in the many weeks and months to come, we're going to take some time to celebrate that, because for me personally, this is something I'm incredibly proud of. I've been proud to be part of DawgNation. I'm proud for the fact that DawgNation has lasted as long as it has. I work with great people, and we get a chance to tell a great story involving Georgia football each and every day, and it would not be possible without all of you. So thank you so much for 10 great years and hopefully many more to come. That's the golden shoe here today. Lousy, stinking Gators. Gator hater updater. Of course, many of these days around here have been celebrating Georgia's dominance over the Florida Gators, including 1,731 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That's our Gator hater updater. Y'all have a great day. I'll see you back in the friendly confines of our studio tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We will look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. You can trust them on all that today. I'm obviously dressed up. Kaylee and I got to get inside, do a little bit of a luncheon here. So let me do one quick say hello on our various comment sections, and then we'll come back and we'll do more comments tomorrow. Starting at DawgNation.com here for a moment. DT checking out, appreciate that. Also giving us congratulations on 10 years, I appreciate that. Senior Dog 54 says the pressure's on me at lunch today, having to manage all those forks. The good news is, while I am dressed up, it's not exactly like white tablecloth style luncheon. Although, you know, when we go on like a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, something like that, they do the full like place setting there. So you have to know like what the bread and the water that work from the outside in on your various silverware. That's about as close as I come to all of that. Let's see what else here. A dog on YouTube here for a moment. Kenneth Holt says I look like I sell timeshares and reverse mortgages. Not me on that, but nonetheless. Paul Moon wondering about Savion Hyder. I don't get the impression that if Georgia takes a second running back in this class, it's going to be a name such as Savion Hyder. Not quite so sure about that. But nonetheless, we'll keep our eye on Georgia running back recruiting. By the way, Georgia also recently extended an offer to an offensive lineman. So there are still offers being made here in this 2026 class to UGA. George Herndon sends a thank you to us. I appreciate that. Matt Rukavina, we'll finish with this today, says, you know, now that I'm home and watching on the big screen, he says it's the pocket handkerchief, the pocket square here that Matt Rukavina says really makes the suit. Well, listen, I appreciate that. We don't dress up a ton for the show. We try to keep it casual. But when we do, it's kind of nice to hear nice things from all of you. I certainly appreciate that. All right, I got to get inside. Kaylee does too. So we'll get ready to talk to you tomorrow. Back in the studio, longer comment section then. Thank you for being here. That's part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Y'all check out R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on that, including getting your AC tuned up to factory fresh specs. Stay cool and comfortable for the hot weather that's still on its way. R.S. Andrews will help you out with that. Back tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We will look forward to talking to you then.